The rain fell in heavy sheets over the Capitol, the kind of storm that made the city feel like it was drowning. It was past midnight when the first alert flashed across the screens, a breaking news banner, urgent and trembling with disbelief. President Marcus Hale found dead in a remote alley near the old government district. Assassination suspected. The words pulsed like a live wire, shocking the nation awake. Social media erupted. Hadn't the president just delivered a televised address hours ago? Footage from the crime scene was chaotic. Flashing police lights, a body under a tarp, a single blurred photo of a face that almost looked like him. Reporters scrambled, politicians issued panic statements, and conspiracy forums lit up with theories. A coup? A revenge killing by the opposition? Or worse, had the president been hiding something so dangerous it got him murdered? The country held its breath, waiting for answers that didn't come. By dawn, the confusion only deepened. No suspect, no motive, just a growing sense that something was wrong. Then at 9 a.m., as the nation's top investigators prepared to address the press, the unthinkable happened. Live cameras caught the moment the door behind the podium opened, and President Hale himself walked out. Pale, disheveled, but undeniably alive. The room exploded. He stared at the crowd as if he didn't recognize them, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't remember last night," he said, his voice hollow. He offered no explanation for the body found in his likeness. No denial, just silence. And as the broadcast cut abruptly, one reporter's frantic question hung in the air. "Then who the hell did we just find dead?" The White House went into lockdown. Advisors, aides, and security personnel moved like ghosts through the halls, their whispers sharp with fear. No one could explain how the president had appeared, alive after the entire country had mourned his death. The alleyway where the body was found was now cordoned off by military personnel, and journalists who got too close were forcibly turned away. The official statement was a masterclass in evasion. The situation is under investigation. No further details can be confirmed at this time. But the internet had already begun its own investigation. A grainy video surfaced from a nearby traffic camera, time-stamped just before midnight. It showed a figure in a dark coat, tall with the president's unmistakable posture, walking alone toward the alley. Then a flicker in the footage, like a skipped frame. When the image stabilized, the figure was gone. In its place, a shadowy blur, too fast to be human, vanished into the darkness. The video was deleted within minutes, but not before millions had seen it. Theories spiraled. Clones, body doubles, a staged assassination gone wrong. Behind closed doors, the president's behavior grew stranger. He refused medical examinations. He avoided mirrors. When his chief of staff, Daniel Reeves, pressed him about the previous night, Hale's response was a whisper. "I heard them. They warned me." Before Reeves could ask who, the president's personal doctor was summoned and never seen again. The next morning, Reeves resigned without explanation, leaving only a single note on his desk. He was warned. Meanwhile, the coroner's office reported that the body from the alley had vanished from the morgue. Security footage showed nothing but static at the exact time of the disappearance. The lead investigator, Agent Carla Vasquez, found her case files corrupted, her witnesses suddenly unreachable. The only clue? A single word scribbled on the back of a missing evidence photo. Nightmare. The city was a pressure cooker of fear and speculation, the streets buzzing with hushed conversations and nervous glances. Every news outlet had shifted from reporting facts to weaving narratives. Some claimed the president had been replaced by an imposter. Others whispered of secret government experiments gone horribly wrong. The most chilling theory, buried in the darker corners of the web, suggested that the man on television wasn't Marcus Hale at all, but something wearing his face, his voice, his memories. The proof? A slip during his latest press conference. When asked about his daughter's birthday, he'd hesitated, his smile just a fraction too late, as if searching for an answer that wasn't there. Small details, but in the absence of truth, they became damning. Agent Vasquez, now operating outside official channels, tracked down the last person to see the president before his supposed death. A security detail member who had called in sick that night. She found him in a dingy motel room, sweating through feverish nightmares. He refused to speak at first, his hands shaking around a half-empty bottle of whiskey, but when she showed him the corrupted surveillance stills, he broke. "We weren't supposed to be there," he muttered. Hale insisted on the detour, said he had to meet someone. Then, the lights went out, not like a blackout, like the dark itself moved. His voice dropped to a whisper. When the flashlights came back on, he was just standing there, smiling. But his eyes, the man shuddered, and Vasquez didn't need him to finish. She'd seen the president's latest address, the way his pupils seemed just a shade too large, too reflective, like a predator's caught in headlights. Meanwhile, in the Oval Office, the president was rewriting history. Old speeches were pulled from archives, staff members were reassigned or quietly dismissed, and a new executive order, buried under layers of bureaucratic jargon, authorized the seizure of all medical records related to biological anomalies. The few journalists who noticed the change were stonewalled, their press passes revoked under vague security concerns. But one reporter, a veteran investigative journalist named Lena Cruz, managed to slip through the cracks. She'd been digging into Hale's past for months, ever since a source had tipped her off about a classified project from his early political career, something called Echo Protocol. The files were gone, scrubbed from every database, but the name alone was enough to make her blood run cold. Because in the hours before the president's alleged death, his last phone call hadn't been to his wife or his advisors. It had been to a private facility marked under one word in the logs: Echo. The storm that had begun as a whisper of rain now howled through the city like a living thing, rattling windows and drowning out the sound of hurried footsteps as Lena Cruz moved through the shadows near the abandoned industrial zone on the outskirts of the capital. Her source had been clear. This was where the call had originated. This was where the answers lay buried beneath layers of rusted metal and government lies. The facility loomed ahead, a relic of the Cold War era, its high fences crowned with barbed wire that glinted wet under the flickering glow of a dying streetlight. No guards patrolled the perimeter, no cameras turned to track her movements, and that silence was more unnerving than any alarm. It was as if the place had been forgotten by the world, deliberately erased from memory, yet something inside still pulsed with a terrible, hidden purpose. She slipped through a gap in the fence, her breath shallow, the weight of her recorder in her pocket a small comfort against the crushing sense of dread. The main door was sealed, but a service entrance hung slightly ajar, the lock broken from the inside as if someone, or something, had forced its way out in a hurry. The air inside was thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something metallic and sour that clung to the back of her throat. The walls were lined with faded posters, their edges curled with age, warning of biohazards and restricted access. But it was the writing on the walls that stopped her cold. Not graffiti, not the scrawled notes of some frantic scientist, but deep, deliberate gouges in the metal, as if made by claws. Words repeated over and over in a language she didn't recognize, except for one phrase, carved above a shattered observation window. He was warned. Further in, the facility opened into a cavernous chamber, its center dominated by a massive cylindrical tank. Its glass walls cracked and streaked with something dark and viscous. The floor around it was littered with broken syringes, discarded lab coats, and pages upon pages of hastily shredded documents. But one page remained intact, half buried under a fallen chair. Lena snatched it up, her hands trembling as she pieced together the fragmented sentences under the beam of her flashlight. Subject 7 has exceeded all projections. Cellular regeneration at 300%. Vocal replication flawless. But the eyes remain unstable. The rest was torn away, but the header at the top was unmistakable. Echo Protocol, Phase 3. A sound from deeper in the facility sent her heart into her throat. A wet, clicking noise like bones rearranging themselves under skin. She didn't wait to see what made it. She ran. The page crumpled in her fist, the truth now a lead weight in her chest. Because if the president had been here, if this was where he had called from that night, then the man on television wasn't Marcus Hale. And whatever had taken his place was still inside these walls, waiting in the dark. The rain had turned the streets into rivers by the time Lena Cruz stumbled out of the facility, her clothes soaked through, her mind racing with fragments of nightmare. She clutched the stolen document against her chest like a shield, though the words etched into it offered no protection, only deeper horror. The cab ride back to the city passed in a blur of neon reflections and staticky radio reports about unrest near the White House. Protesters had gathered, their signs demanding answers. Where is the real president? And what happened in the alley? Police barricades snaked through the streets, but the crowd's anger was a living thing, pulsing in time with the thunder overhead. Lena's hands shook as she dialed her editor, but the call dropped mid-ring. When she tried again, a recorded voice informed her the number was no longer in service. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Across town, Agent Vasquez sat in a dim safe house, the glow of her laptop casting sharp shadows across her face. The files she'd risked her career to access sprawled across the screen. Medical reports, black budget allocations, and a single heavily redacted memo titled, Termination of Echo Assets. The dates lined up with Hale's first term in office, back when he'd been a junior senator pushing for defense reform. The pieces were there, but they refused to form a picture, until one name surfaced again and again, Dr. Eleanor Voss, a lead geneticist quietly scrubbed from all public records 3 years prior. Vasquez's fingers flew over the keyboard, digging deeper until she hit a firewall, and then, inexplicably, access granted. The screen flickered, and a single video file autoplayed. Grainy footage showed a lab not unlike the one Lena had just fled. A woman in a stained lab coat, Voss, spoke directly to the camera, her voice raw with exhaustion. They told us it was about saving lives, cloning organs, replicating tissue for burn victims. But phase 2 was always the goal, whole body replication. And when they brought in Subject Zero, a crash off camera. Voss's head snapped toward the noise. The video cut to static. The last audible words were a whisper. God help us. They're awake. Back at the White House, the president, or the thing wearing his face, stood at the resolute desk, his fingers tracing the edges of a sealed envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper bore the names of every scientist involved in Echo Protocol. One by one, they disappeared over the years. Accidents, suicides. Now only 2 remained unaccounted for. Voss and the man who'd authorized the project's funding, a man whose signature matched the one at the bottom of Hale's executive orders. The thing that was not Hale smiled, its teeth just a shade too white, its reflection in the window failing to blink when it should have. Somewhere beneath the city, in a sealed chamber no longer on any blueprint, something in the dark stirred in response. The city had become a tinderbox of paranoia, every shadow stretching too long, every stranger's glance loaded with unspoken suspicion. Lena Cruz moved through the chaos like a ghost, the stolen Echo Protocol documents burning a hole in her bag, the weight of what she now knew pressing down on her with every step. She had tried to reach her contacts at major news outlets, but lines were dead, emails bounced back, and the few colleagues who answered whispered warnings before abruptly hanging up. The last one, a seasoned investigative reporter who had covered 3 administrations, had sounded genuinely afraid. They're watching everything, Lena. Even this call. If you have something, don't send it. Bring it. And don't trust anyone who knew the president before that night. The words coiled around her like a noose. Who was left to trust? The government was purging records. The police were turning away missing persons cases linked to the alley, and Agent Vasquez had vanished from the system entirely. Lena's only lead was Dr. Eleanor Voss. The woman had become a specter, a name whispered in the darkest corners of conspiracy forums, a footnote in classified documents. But one clue remained, a faded address scribbled in the margins of the shredded lab notes, an old psychiatric hospital on the edge of the city that had been shuttered for decades. The place was a graveyard of broken windows and peeling paint, its halls echoing with the ghosts of forgotten experiments. Lena's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing rusted gurneys, shattered vials, and walls scarred with the same strange symbols she had seen in the Echo facility. Then a sound, a faint rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on glass. She followed it to a sealed basement door, the lock freshly broken. Inside, a makeshift lab hummed with stolen equipment, its centerpiece a bank of monitors showing live feeds from across the city, White House corridors, military checkpoints, even Lena's own apartment. At the heart of it all sat Dr. Voss, her once pristine lab coat now frayed, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. She didn't look up as Lena entered. "Took you long enough," she muttered. "They'll be here soon. You've seen what they can do. So tell me, reporter, do you still want the truth?" Meanwhile, in a secure bunker beneath a nondescript office building, Agent Vasquez stared at a screen of her own. The footage was grainy, lifted from a traffic cam near the alley the night the president died. She had watched it 100 times, but this time, she slowed it frame by frame. The moment the president or his double stepped into the alley, the shadows seemed to twist, reaching for him like living tendrils. Then for a single impossible frame, the figure on screen turned toward the camera, its face splitting into a grin too wide for human anatomy. Vasquez's blood turned to ice. She had seen that expression before, in the Oval Office, during the president's last address. The moment the teleprompter had glitched, and his smile had stretched just a second too long, a notification flashed on her screen, a security alert from the psychiatric hospital. Motion detected. Vasquez grabbed her sidearm. She knew what was coming. The thing in the White House wasn't the only one, and they were waking up. The storm that had been brewing over the city for days finally broke with apocalyptic fury, rain slashing sideways in wind-driven sheets as lightning split the sky like the crack of a rifle shot. Lena Cruz stood frozen in Dr. Voss's makeshift lab, the weight of the scientist's question hanging between them like a guillotine blade. The truth. Did she really want it? The monitors around them flickered with live feeds of a city descending into chaos. Military vehicles rolling through downtown, crowds scattering as gunfire echoed off buildings, news anchors repeating empty platitudes about temporary unrest. But one feed stood out. The White House lawn, where the president, or the thing pretending to be him, was stepping up to a hastily prepared podium, his suit immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, his smile just a fraction too symmetrical. Lena's breath caught as she watched his lips move, the sound muted, but the closed captioning spelling out the words that would end the world as they knew it. "My fellow Americans, the time for fear has passed. What comes next is evolution." Dr. Voss's hands trembled as she typed frantically on a rusted keyboard, pulling up files Lena couldn't comprehend. DNA sequences, neural maps, something labeled cognitive overwrite protocol. "They were never clones," Voss whispered, her voice breaking. "That would have been too kind." Echo was about perfect replication, not just of bodies, but memories, personalities, down to the last synaptic spark. "We thought we were creating backups for world leaders in case of catastrophe. But Subject Zero, something went wrong in the transfer, or maybe it worked exactly as intended." A crash echoed from the floors above them, the sound of heavy footsteps moving too fast, joints cracking in ways that made Lena's stomach turn. Voss didn't look up. The original Hale discovered what they were doing with his duplicate. That's why he went to the alley that night, to meet a source, to expose them. But the echo, another crash, closer now. Voss finally met Lena's eyes, her own brimming with tears. The echo remembered being him, and it didn't want to be disposed of. The door exploded inward. Lena had just enough time to see something that looked almost human, almost Hale, before the gunshots rang out. Agent Vasquez stood in the doorway, her service weapon smoking, her face a mask of grim determination. The creature on the floor twitched, its limbs spasming in unnatural angles, its mouth opening to reveal rows of needle-like teeth as it laughed. A sound like radio static and breaking glass. "Too late," it gurgled, blood that wasn't quite red bubbling over its lips. "We're already everywhere." The monitors around them went dark one by one, until only the White House feed remained. The president, the thing, was still speaking, but his face was melting, reforming, cycling through a dozen different expressions before settling on something that wasn't human at all. Behind him, shadows moved where shadows shouldn't. Shapes that had been standing perfectly still in the crowd now stepped forward in perfect unison, their faces smoothing into identical blank slates. Vasquez grabbed Lena's arm, dragging her toward a back exit as the building shook around them. The facility, the agent panted. There's a failsafe, a way to purge the network, but we have to move now. Lena risked one last look at the monitor. The president's mouth kept moving, but the words weren't for the public anymore. They were for her, for anyone still listening. You'll join us soon? The thing that wasn't hail whispered directly into the camera, its pupils swallowing the light whole. After all, we warned you. Then the feed cut out, plunging the world into static, and leaving Lena with the terrible certainty that somewhere in a lab buried deep beneath the earth, something older and hungrier than Echo was waking up. And this time, there would be no warning at all.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.